Welcome to this Vlookup course. First things first, what is Vlookup? Well, it's a function, a predefined formula you can use to look things up in an Excel list like this one or in Excel tables. It works kind of how you use a phone book. You look up someone's name so that you can get their phone number. You can use Vlookup to do the same thing. For example, use a part number here in the left column to look up a part price. This is especially handy when you have a large spreadsheet or when you have to look up something repetitively. With Vlookup, you use a formula to essentially say to Excel, here's a value in the left column. Go to another column, find a corresponding value on the same row, and show me the result. Vlookup, by the way, is not the only lookup function you could use in Excel, but in this course, it's all about Vlookup. To get started, I'll show you two examples of Vlookup in action. You'll see more examples later, and as we go, you'll learn how to use Vlookup. In this first example, looking up part prices by using part numbers, I'm using a 4-column Excel list with part numbers in the left column, part name, part price, and part status. I've already created the Vlookup formula here in cell G3, and I'll show it to you up here in the formula bar. Don't worry about its various parts or arguments right now. That'll come later. I've got an error here in this cell, and that's essentially because Excel is waiting for me to enter a part number into this cell. So I'll enter, say, part A029 and press enter and get a price of $3.43. So what happened? I'll scroll down and show you. Excel looked up A029 in the left column and returned the part price of $3.43 from this column. Here's another example. I'll use Vlookup to look up the appropriate discount for the quantity purchased. This time I'm using an Excel table instead of a list. If you're not familiar with tables, you'll have a chance to create one in the practice at the end of the course. The table has two columns, one for quantity and one for discount. I've created the Vlookup formula earlier in this cell, and here it is up in the formula bar. I just want you to take a look at it. You don't need to worry about its arguments for now. There's an error here in this cell again because Excel is waiting for me to enter a quantity in this cell. Now this example is different than the last. In that formula, I was looking for an exact match between a part number and its part price. Now customers aren't going to buy just in quantities of 1, 10, and 100 and so on. They can buy in whatever amount they want. So I don't want to limit Vlookup to only finding exact matches. I'll enter 1001 here, and I get a discount of 9%. What happened? The amount listed in the quantity column is 1,000, but 1,001 units were sold. The formula sees that the quantity is greater than 1,000, but less than 10,000, where the next discount of 12% kicks in, so the discount is 9%. I could figure out these discounts myself, but the table in the formula leaves the guesswork out of it. Up next, you'll learn about the arguments for the Vlookup formula. Learning how to use Vlookup will help you know when to use Vlookup. We'll start on the how by taking a detailed look at the formula arguments in this first example. But before we start, note that the V in Vlookup stands for vertical. You can only use Vlookup in a list or table arranged in vertical columns. In this example, part number and part name and so on are all arranged in columns. If your data is not in columns, Vlookup just won't work for you. Now for the arguments. Vlookup has 4 arguments. Argument 1, lookup value. What value are you searching for? If you were looking up a phone number in a phone book, the person's name would be the lookup value. In this example, the part number is the lookup value and cell G2 is the lookup value argument. Let's see what happens. I type the lookup value, say A003, in cell G2 and get a return price of $15.49. Excel looks for A003 in the left column and then returns the price in another column on the corresponding row. And here's a kind of VLOOKUP gotcha. The lookup value must be in the first or left column. This is a hard and fast rule. If your lookup value is not in the first column, and for some reason you can't move the data to the first column, VLOOKUP won't work. Argument 2, table array. Where do you want to search? This is also called the lookup table. I've used cell references here to define the lookup table, which includes everything from cell A3 through cell D52. Argument 3, column index number. Which column contains the search result? Notice the argument says number, not column heading, and this can be confusing. VLOOKUP doesn't use column headings such as A, B, C, and so on. Instead, you literally count the number of columns starting from the left to arrive at the number of the search result column. Here, since I'm searching for part price in column C, I start counting from the left, 1, 2, 3, and 3 is the column index number. Argument 4, range lookup. Should the lookup value be true or false? That depends on whether you need an exact match or an approximate match. Here, I need an exact match between the part price and the part number. When you need an exact match, the argument is false or can also be entered as 0. That false equals exact can be hard to remember and is another area that can trip you up. So try to remember that false equals exact match. Now we'll go through the arguments for the second example. Argument 1, lookup value. The value I'm searching for is quantity and the argument is cell F20. I type a quantity, say 1,045, in the cell and get a 9% discount. VLOOKUP looked the quantity up here in the first column. Remember, the lookup value must be in the first or leftmost column. Argument 2, table array. This is the table I want to search. In this example, I used a defined name for the cell references, quantity discount. I did that just to show you that you can use a named range or you can use cell references. Use whichever method you prefer. Notice that this table does not begin in column A. Instead, it starts in column B. The first column of your list or table can start anywhere. For example, it could start in column K, and that's just fine. Put the table where you need it to be. Argument 3, column index number. Which column contains the search result? In this case, counting from the left, 1, 2. 2 is the column index number argument. Argument 4, range lookup. Should the lookup range be true or false? Here, I don't want to limit VLOOKUP only to an exact match because customers can buy 1,000 units, which is exact, but they could also buy 1,001, which would require an approximate match. So the argument is true, which will return an exact match if one exists. You can also enter the argument as 1, or you can leave the argument blank, in which case Excel will assume it is true or approximate. By the way, if the argument is true, you should sort your first left column in ascending order, or you may get unexpected formula results. It's also okay, however, to sort the first column even if the argument is false. Next up, a new example using VLOOKUP on more than one spreadsheet. In this example, I have two spreadsheets with metrics for a website. The data was originally stored in Access and then exported into separate Excel spreadsheets. The first sheet, Page Views here, contains page IDs, page views and the percentage of hits for each page on the site in September. The second sheet, I'll go there, Pages, contains the same page IDs as well as the page names. And I'll switch back to page views. What I want to do is enter a VLOOKUP formula and use the page IDs to look up the page names, and so that I can tell at a glance which page got 490,000 plus views as opposed to just looking at a page number ID. Now I'll go to Pages again. This is going to be my table array or my lookup table, and I need the cell references for the table argument. So click here. It starts in cell A2 and go down to the bottom, and it ends in cell B39. And I'll scroll up a bit. While I'm here, I'll also get the column index number argument. As you remember, you start at the left, counting from 1, 1, 2. Page names will be my search results, so the argument will be 2. And I'll click back to page views, and I'm going to type a couple of headings, page IDs, and page names. And next, I'll enter the formula in cell F4. You know, when you don't use a function every day, it's easy to forget its arguments. So I'm going to show you how to let Excel help enter the formula for you. I'll click the Formulas tab here at the top of the ribbon, and I've got a function library with different kinds of books in the library. And here's one that says Lookup and Reference. I know VLOOKUP is a lookup function, so I'll click the arrow and scroll down until I get to VLOOKUP, and I briefly saw a definition there for it, but at any rate I know that's what I'm looking for, so I'll click it, and that brings up the function arguments dialog box. And first we see that the function itself is defined here, looking for a value in the leftmost column of a table, which you already know, and it also describes the arguments. Well, my first value is a lookup value, and I know I want to click in cell F3 because that's where I'm going to be entering the page IDs eventually. Then I go to my next argument, the table array, and explains down here what a table array is. This is also called your lookup table. Well, we know that is on the next spreadsheet called Pages. So I'm going to type Pages in, followed by an exclamation point, which indicates it's a separate page. Then I'll type my cell references, A2 colon B39, and so that describes the entire argument. Then I'll click here in column index number, and that's described down here that the first column of values in the table is 1, and I'm looking for the column number from which the matching value will be returned, and I counted earlier, that's column 2. And then finally, range lookup. Now this is optional. You don't have to fill it in if the argument is true, but if the argument is false, you do need to enter it. And it's described down here that if you want an exact match, which we certainly do between the page ID and the page name, you want to enter false. So I'll type that in, and then I'll click OK. I've immediately got an error here because the formula is waiting for me to enter a value here in this cell. So I'll click on the cell, and then I'm curious as to which page is getting over 490,000 page views. So I'm just going to eliminate any typing errors. I'm not just going to type that in the cell. I'll copy instead by going Control-C and then click here and go Control-V. And we see that Comics and Humor is getting 490,000 page views in September. I'll press Escape to get rid of the marquee here, and then I want to find out which page is getting the third most views in September. I'll do Control-C again, click here, and find out that it's International News 1. When you think about VLOOKUP, it might help you to remember how to use it if you describe it to yourself as 3 W's. And I'm on my Pages tab with my lookup table, and the first W stands for what. What is your lookup value? And remember, it has to be in the left column, and that's what these page IDs are, is my lookup value. Where do you want to look? That's your table array or your lookup table, and that's this entire list here. And then which? which column number contains the search result. In this example, that's column 2, starting from the left, 1, 2. Up next, when you need to use absolute cell references with Vlookup. In this example, I've got two separate lists on the spreadsheet. In column A, I've got names. In column B, each person's salary. And in column C, I want to use a Vlookup formula to find out the tax rate for each person's salary. In this second list, which is going to be my lookup table, I've got a tax table. In the left column, it displays salary range, and in the second column, it displays the tax percentage for each range. So I'll go ahead and start my formula by typing equal, and by the time I type a few letters of Vlookup, Excel's formula autocomplete pops up, verifying that Vlookup is the function that I'm looking for. It is, so I'll go ahead and double click, and Excel starts the formula for me. And what's really nice about formula autocomplete is that in case you don't remember the arguments, it lists every argument for you in its proper order. And if you're not sure what an argument is, you click a link to get a help topic. So the first argument is lookup value. What do I want to look up? Well, I want to start by looking up this salary, $43,999, which happens to be in cell B2. That's my lookup value argument. I'll enter a comma to separate the argument from the table array, which is my lookup table, or in other words, where do I want to look? Well, I want to look in this tax table. To get the cell references into the formula, I'll just click and drag, and that gets F5 through G24 into the formula. I'll enter a comma. Next is the column index number. Which column contains my search result? Well, I'm looking for the tax rate, so counting from the left, 1, 2, 2 is my argument. Enter a comma, then finally range lookup. In this case, I want true or an approximate match. I'll double click. Excel enters that in the formula. I'll enter my ending parentheses and press enter. Now, to get the result for everyone else here, I'm going to drag this formula down the column. In other words, I'm copying the formula. When you copy this formula, you need absolute cell references to lock the cell range of the lookup table. I'll go up here in the formula bar, and this formula has relative cell references so far. To convert F5 into an absolute reference, I'll press the F4 key on my keyboard, and the dollar signs indicate that it's absolute, and then I'll click in G24 and press my F4 key again, and now G24 is also absolute. I'll press enter, and now I'll copy the formula down the column by using the fill handle. I'll just click and drag down, release the mouse button, and there I've got the tax rate for each person. Now to verify the accuracy, for example, Phillips earned $28,909 and got a 5% tax rate. And over here in the table, anyone who earns between $25,000 and $29,999 gets a 5% tax rate. Notice, by the way, that the true argument for the range lookup means that this first column must be sorted in ascending order from smallest to largest. Instead of using absolute cell references, you can also lock your lookup table by using a named range. You'll see how to do that in the practice at the end of the course. Up next, help in avoiding Vlookup errors. We'll go argument by argument to talk about ways to avoid Vlookup errors. Before that, though, remember the most important thing before you start is that the V in Vlookup stands for vertical. Your information must be arranged in vertical columns similar to this, or Vlookup just won't work. Argument 1, lookup value. Your lookup value must exist in the leftmost column, for example here in part number column, of your lookup table. If not, and it's not practical to move a column to the left, then Vlookup won't work for you. And I'm going to go to the Discount tab here. Also, remember that the physical location of the leftmost column doesn't matter, just so it's leftmost. For example, this column starts in column B, or it could be in K, just so long as you're looking at the left or first column in the list or table. And I'll go back to part price here, and another thing that can cause a problem is formatting discrepancies. Say, for example, that I type A-001 here, and keep your eye on the part price. As I press enter, I go from $68 to an error, and that's because Excel is looking for A001 without a dash. And here's another kind of formatting error. Say that I put an extra space here, and then I type in A003. Well, we get an error because Excel doesn't know about that extra space. It's just looking for A003 without an extra space. So it's a very good idea before you start to review your lookup table and look for spelling errors, formatting discrepancy, anything that might cause Excel to not be able to find the lookup value in the left column. Argument 2, table array. Are you using absolute cell references when you copy the VLOOKUP formula to other cells? When you copy the formula to other cells, you must refer to your lookup table or table array either by using absolute cell references or a named range. Here we've got some errors, and that's because if we look up here in the formula bar, we've got relative cell references instead of absolutes. I'll fix that by pressing F4 on my keyboard and moving to G24 and pressing F4 on my keyboard. I'll press enter. Then I'm going to delete these results and copy the formula once again by dragging down, and then we get the correct results. Is your lookup table on a different sheet or workbook? If so, is it referenced correctly in the arguments? In this example, we've got page views and pages. If I go to the formula here, and I've used an exclamation point to indicate that pages is a different spreadsheet. If I remove that and press enter, then suddenly we've got an error. I'll repair that error by putting the exclamation point back, and once again the formula is working correctly. Argument 3, column index number. Are you pointing to the correct column in the lookup table? Count over from the first column, for example here, 1, 2, 3. I want to look up part price. This is an easy place in which to make an error. If you don't have the correct number, you may not get an error, but you could get back the wrong data from another column. For example, I'll click here, and I'm going to take the 3 argument and replace it with 2. And in this case, I get a part name instead of a part price. That's not terrible, but it's not the information I was looking for. Or another error you can make is I'll replace the 2 with a 4. Do you see this error? There is no column 4, and so we've got an error. Make sure that you count correctly, starting at 1, to get to the number that's your column index number argument. Argument 4, range lookup. Have you used true when the argument should be false, or vice versa? Remember, use false for an exact match. Use true to find the closest match or the approximate match to the lookup value. For example, I've used true here when I'm looking for an income tax rate for a list of salaries. Now if I change this from true to false, I get an error, and if I copy that formula down, I'll get an error all the way because there's just not an exact match here. Now I'll change that back to true and copy the formula down once again, and we get the correct results. If you're using true as your range lookup, are the values in the first column sorted in ascending, smallest to largest, or A through Z order? If not, you may get incorrect or unexpected results. You don't have to sort with a false argument, but it's okay to do that. Be sure to look for a link in the quick reference card at the end of the course for an excellent VLOOKUP troubleshooting guide. And this is the end of the course.